I still remember the echo of my father's voice bouncing off the cold walls. "Pack your things and leave. Right now." His eyes burned with anger, and my mother stood behind him, arms crossed, lips trembling in a mixture of rage and disappointment. I was 17, and had just told them I wanted to pursue game programming instead of following the path they'd carefully laid out for me, law school. My hands shook as I frantically shoved my few belongings into an old duffel bag. I kept hearing them say I was throwing away my future, that I was destroying all their plans and sacrifices. In that moment, it felt like my entire world was crumbling. My little brother Damien smirked from the corner, whispering, "You should have listened," before turning away. When my father shoved some loose bills at me and slammed the door, I froze on the front porch. A swarm of emotions, fear, anger, heartbreak, collided in my chest. My eyes welled with tears, but I refused to let them fall. I told myself I would not let despair consume me. Despite the ache in my heart, I forced one foot in front of the other and walked away from the only home I had ever known. I had no idea where I'd sleep that night. I just knew I needed to find my grandmother. She was my only hope. Grandma lived in a modest, single-story house about 4 bus stops away from my parents' place. Standing at her door, bag clutched to my chest, I couldn't stop shaking. The air was chilly, but what rattled me more was the realization that I was truly on my own. Grandma's eyes widened in concern when she saw me. She wore her usual worn floral apron and had a faint streak of flour on her cheek. Without a word, she pulled me inside, held me close, and said softly, "My dear Ava, you can always stay with me." My tears finally flowed, warmth and relief flooding me all at once. As soon as she heard the whole story, my parents' ultimatum, their anger at my career choice, she sighed heavily but never judged me. Instead, she squeezed my hand and said, "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. You have a gift. Don't ever let anyone take that from you." That night, I lay on her old sofa bed, half frozen from shock, half heated by my own defiant resolve. My thoughts spun, replaying the scene where my father's voice rang through the house. Still, Grandma's gentle reassurance provided a faint glow of hope. I made up my mind. I would do whatever it took to prove my parents wrong. The next morning, the smell of bacon pulled me out of restless sleep. Grandma was in the kitchen, humming quietly as she prepared breakfast. I walked in, eyes heavy from crying, but her warm smile cut through some of my sadness. "Ava," she began, her voice calm, "I know it feels like the world is against you, but I believe in you. Do you have a plan?" My plan was fuzzy at best. I wanted to learn coding, build games, and see them come to life. But at 17, I had no idea how to get there. I told Grandma I'd do any job I could find, waitress, cashier, cleaning tables, just to pay for the online classes I needed. She patted my shoulder gently. "Don't forget to keep your spirit alive," she said. "You'll need more than money to keep your dream burning. Promise me you'll also find time to code, no matter how tired you get." I nodded, inhaling the comforting scent of bacon and eggs. Her unconditional acceptance filled me with a new sense of purpose. I resolved to show everyone, especially my parents, that my dream was worth fighting for. This became a silent vow I repeated to myself. I would not back down. I began looking for work immediately. Local cafes and grocery stores were my first targets. At one shabby diner, the manager barely looked at me before waving me off. Apparently, a 17-year-old with no experience wasn't worth his time. I trudged to the next spot, determined not to be defeated. After hours of rejections, I finally found a small bookstore that needed help organizing shelves. The pay was dismal, but it was something. The owner, Mr. Barry, saw my desperation and maybe a spark of resolve. He handed me a mop and said, "Clean up first and we'll see how it goes." I spent my first day scraping gum off the floors, dusting hidden corners, and sorting old books that smelled like forgotten histories. My fingertips turned grimy, and I felt sweat trickle down my back. Still, I held on to Grandma's words, "You'll need more than money to keep your dream burning." When I got home, my shoes left dusty footprints on her clean kitchen floor. Yet Grandma just laughed gently, handed me a rag, and said she'd start dinner while I freshened up. Exhaustion weighed on me, but that night I forced myself to open my laptop and start an online tutorial on game development. I needed to code, even if my hands shook from fatigue. Weeks turned into months. I took on a second job at a fast food restaurant after the bookstore closed each day. My routine was grueling. Wake up before sunrise, help Grandma with any small chores, go to the bookstore, clean and catalog books, rush to the restaurant for the dinner rush, flip burgers, mop floors, then collapse at Grandma's by midnight. Even so, I insisted on coding for at least an hour before bed. My body ached constantly. My back screamed from long hours standing, and my eyes burned from sleepless nights. Yet, in the midst of this, small moments kept me going. Grandma always left a mug of hot cocoa waiting on the kitchen table, with a note that simply read, "For my brave girl." It made me smile, reminding me I wasn't completely alone. On rare days off, I immersed myself in tutorials. I taught myself everything I could: basic programming languages, game mechanics, level design. I imagined building whole worlds from scratch, where a player's choices could shape virtual realities. Despite the exhaustion, each tiny progress felt like a victory. A small step toward proving my worth to people who once thought I was worthless. I prayed that one day I'd no longer scrape pennies together to survive, and instead, I'd be free to create the games I dreamed about every single night. It was around this time that my parents reached out to me for the first time since they'd thrown me out. Their messages, delivered through Damien, were cold and distant, as if I were nothing but a cautionary tale they told their friends. Damien would text me something like, "Mom and Dad say you can still fix this. Come home and do law school." No apology, no softness, just demands. I felt torn whenever I saw his name flash on my phone. Part of me wanted to scream that they never had the right to control my life. Another part craved their approval, some love or acknowledgement that they still considered me family. Grandma saw the torment on my face and said, "Child, if they want to see you, let them come. If they truly regret it, they will come to you." That gave me strength. I responded to Damien with a short, firm text. "I'm staying with Grandma. I'm not changing my mind." The bookstore paychecks grew slightly with time, but we still barely got by. Occasionally, I'd overhear Mr. Barry boasting to customers about his young coding genius, as though I were some rare find. That little bit of pride helped keep me going, reminding me that at least someone believed in me beyond dear Grandma. My 18th birthday arrived quietly. There were no big celebrations, no balloons. Grandma, however, surprised me with a small chocolate cake she baked herself. We shared it in the living room, just the two of us. She lit a single candle and said, "Wish for something that truly matters to you." I closed my eyes and whispered a wish that one day I'd create a game that would change my life. Maybe even the world's perspective on indie developers. I wanted to make something innovative, something truly magical, an immersive experience that would make players feel alive. That night, I made real progress coding my first playable level. It was a simple puzzle sequence featuring hidden doors and shifting walls, nothing revolutionary. Yet, seeing it function, seeing the character move according to code I wrote, felt like the ground was opening into endless possibilities. I was no longer just a dreamer. I was a creator. As I crawled into bed, the house creaked softly around me. Grandma's gentle snores drifted through the thin walls. I felt tears gathering in my eyes, but this time, they were tears of gratitude and hope. I whispered, "I'll make us proud, Grandma. I promise." Juggling multiple jobs consumed most of my time, yet my curiosity about programming only grew. When the bookstore was quiet, I flipped through software engineering books whenever I could sneak a moment. Sometimes Mr. Barry caught me reading instead of mopping, but he'd only chuckle. "Don't let me stand in the way of brilliance, kid," he'd say, turning a blind eye as I devoured every chapter. I began to plot a path forward. Some part of me realized that to truly break into game development, I'd need formal credentials or a portfolio that spoke for itself. But college felt out of reach financially. Instead, I decided to focus on building small, demo-level projects, uploading them to free game platforms, and hoping someone, somewhere, would notice. Internet access at Grandma's was shaky, but late at night, I stayed in the living room, uploading small test builds whenever our spotty Wi-Fi allowed. Whenever a random commenter praised my work or critiqued a bug, I felt a surge of energy. Bit by bit, I was learning. Bit by bit, I was showing the world, if anyone was listening, that I had something to offer. Every day, I told myself, "One step at a time, Ava. You can't give up." By 19, I added a third job cleaning offices on weekends. My days blurred together. I'd go from mopping the bookstore's floors, to flipping burgers, to scrubbing corporate carpets. In spare moments, I coded furiously, often existing on 3 or 4 hours of sleep. Grandma grew worried about my health. She'd say, "Your eyes look so tired, my dear. Please remember you're only human." I tried to pace myself, but the sheer weight of bills plus the dream I carried pushed me to keep going. I kept reminding myself of that vow. I would succeed at programming games. I would not let my parents be proven right. Damien's text stopped coming. My father and mother, apparently, were still furious. Word reached me through a distant cousin that they often told people I was selfish, that I'd abandoned the family. A fresh wave of hurt and bitterness rose in me whenever I heard such things. But I also felt a strange sense of freedom. If they wanted to shut me out, fine. I'd build a new door for myself. During one of my coding sessions, I created a small character that could jump across floating platforms in the sky. Something about it spoke to me. It felt like a metaphor for my own life. Each leap a risk, each platform a shaky foothold. But onward I went, refusing to fall. Right around my 20th birthday, Grandma fell ill. At first it seemed like a nasty cold, but her breathing became labored, and she struggled with basic tasks. A visit to the clinic revealed she had pneumonia, and her doctor suggested a hospital stay. We didn't have much money, but I told them to do whatever was necessary. She was all I had. Seeing her hooked up to IV fluids and oxygen lines shattered my heart. She'd always been my strength, the one constant in a life of uncertainty. Now, I listened to the hiss of the oxygen machine, praying she'd make a swift recovery. I took time off from my 3 jobs to be at her side, losing wages I desperately needed, but nothing mattered more than being with her. She woke up one evening, eyes fluttering open, and squeezed my hand. "You'll be all right, Ava. Keep dreaming, keep coding, promise me." I promised her, fighting back tears. The next few days, she showed signs of improvement. I allowed myself a fragile hope that she'd soon be back home, in her worn floral apron, humming gentle tunes in the kitchen. My focus on code slipped for a moment, overshadowed by fear and love. Still, in my downtime, I typed small lines of code on my laptop by her bedside, partly to distract myself from the looming worry. Grandma was discharged after a long week. I helped her settle back home, fluffing her pillows, making her soup. She insisted I return to work, but I couldn't leave her alone just yet. So I negotiated fewer shifts at the fast food place, and Mr. Barry kindly reduced my bookstore hours to part-time. It was a relief to be able to watch over her while continuing to chip away at coding projects whenever she napped. Money got tighter, but I knew we'd pull through, just like we always did. Grandma still had a sparkle in her eyes whenever I showed her a new game element or character design. "How do you come up with this stuff?" she'd marvel. "I'm no artist," I'd say, "but I see these worlds in my head, and I want to bring them to life." "You are an artist," she insisted gently. "You paint with code instead of brushes." Weeks passed, and Grandma's health slowly stabilized. I returned to my heavier workload, but the scare had reminded me that life was short and unpredictable. If I truly wanted to launch my own game someday, I couldn't keep moving at a snail's pace. I needed to push harder, to save money, to gather the resources for something bigger. My coding projects began to attract modest online attention. A few gamers left encouraging feedback on the prototypes I posted, praising the originality of the level design. One day, a small indie gaming blog reached out, requesting an interview. I practically jumped up and down in excitement. Squeezing the interview around my crazy work schedule was tough. I ended up doing it at dawn, speaking quietly from Grandma's living room so I wouldn't wake her. The blogger asked me about my inspirations, my goals, and how I learned to code. He seemed impressed that I was entirely self-taught. "You have genuine potential," he said. "Please keep going. Don't let it fizzle." That small gesture of recognition was like fuel to my soul. It made me believe that real success wasn't just a pipe dream. Maybe one day I could start my own game company. I even had a potential name in mind, JSA Technologies. The letters stood for Just Start Anywhere. My personal motto, that you didn't need a fancy degree or massive backing to begin. That evening, I celebrated by cooking Grandma's favorite stew. She teased me, saying it was too salty, but she grinned ear to ear anyway. The sky outside glowed with the colors of dusk, and for once, I felt that maybe I was on the right track. When I turned 21, I realized I'd been out of my parents' house for 4 long years. I remembered how they kicked me out with no remorse. It felt surreal how time had passed. I rarely heard from them, and Damien remained silent. A part of me wondered if they missed me or regretted their actions. Another part of me felt numb to the idea of reconciling. Meanwhile, Grandma's health took a sharp downturn. One moment, she was spry enough to tease me about my messy coding space. The next, she couldn't get out of bed without gasping for air. Doctor visits became more frequent. They discovered complications in her lungs. She needed more aggressive treatment. Watching her suffer was torture. All the while, I worked my 3 jobs, still coding in scraps of free time. I pleaded with the universe, let her stay, at least until I can show her something truly big, something that proves her faith in me wasn't misplaced. Despite everything, she continued to smile. She'd say, "Whether you build a blockbuster game or not, I'm already proud. Don't ever forget that." I clung to her words like a lifeline, determined to keep going for her sake as well as mine. The day Grandma passed away remains a blur of tears and heartbreak. One evening, she just slipped away, leaving me holding her hand, breath hitching in my throat. The world suddenly felt colder, emptier. She was my rock, my safe place. Without her, I felt an immense void in my chest, like an open wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Neighbors and a few relatives came by to offer their condolences. My parents sent word through Damien, "Sorry for your loss. If you want to move back, you know what to do." No genuine warmth, no direct call, just the same old condition that I returned to law school. I almost broke the phone in anger. In the midst of mourning, I had to face funeral costs, which I could barely afford. Mr. Barry stepped in, covering some of the expenses. A few kind souls from the bookstore and the fast food place pitched in. Their generosity shocked me. It reminded me that family can sometimes be found in unexpected places. Still, after the funeral, I sat alone in the dark house, tears streaming down my face. I wanted to give up. Grandma had been my only anchor. But then I remembered her final words. "I'm already proud." That single phrase saved me. If she believed in me enough to stay proud, even in her last days, I couldn't let her down. Life after Grandma's death was a struggle I never anticipated. The house we shared was deeded in her name, with no clear will. Legal processes started up and extended families circled like vultures, each hoping to claim the property. With nowhere else to go, I feared being evicted, another form of abandonment. I found a 4th job, this time as a late-night janitor in a local mall, to pay for legal fees and living expenses. Exhaustion became my constant companion. Often, as I mopped deserted hallways, I'd catch my reflection in the store windows and barely recognize my own face. Tired eyes, hollow cheeks, a deep sadness etched into every line. Yet, amid this chaos, something miraculous happened. I had been tinkering with a prototype for a new game concept, a puzzle adventure about confronting your deepest fears and illusions. I called it Discover Eyes, because the entire premise revolved around seeing beyond what was visible. I posted a few teaser clips online, and to my astonishment, it garnered hundreds then thousands of views. People were intrigued by its mysterious, atmospheric style. Comments poured in, begging for a full release. That glimmer of hope was like a hand pulling me out of drowning waters. Maybe, just maybe, this would be the break I needed. With the unexpected surge of interest in Discover Eyes, I realized I had to treat this seriously. To do that, I needed more time to develop. So, I took a huge risk. I quit 2 of my jobs, keeping only the bookstore and the mall janitor gig for minimal survival income. It was terrifying. Less income meant greater financial pressure. But the only way to make this game a reality was to devote real hours to it. I coded like my life depended on it. In many ways, it did. I poured all my creativity and pent-up grief into building intricate levels, haunting soundscapes, and story-driven puzzles. I wanted players to feel the emotional weight of exploring a world that mirrored their own anxieties and hopes. I slept in short bursts, occasionally collapsing on the living room couch, laptop still open, lines of code dancing across my dreams. When I was awake, I drank endless cups of cheap coffee to stay focused. Sometimes, I'd hear Grandma's voice in my head, gently reminding me to take breaks, to look after myself. I'd smile sadly, then pushed through a few more hours. This was my shot, and I refused to let it slip away. The first public demo of Discover Eyes was uploaded at 3 in the morning. My heart pounded as I hit the publish button. Almost immediately, feedback started pouring in. Critics called it eerie, surreal, and deeply engaging. Players loved the unique mechanics, unlocking hidden layers of reality, each puzzle revealing a new emotional truth. The buzz was bigger than anything I'd ever experienced. I got emails from small publishers asking if I had a team or if I was open to partnerships. Some streamers showcased the demo, generating buzz across gaming communities. Before I knew it, a niche but passionate fanbase formed around the demo, discussing theories and possible endings on forums. The weight of possibility pressed down on me. This could become something truly significant. With renewed confidence, I took the next big leap. I formally registered my own gaming startup, naming it JSA Technologies. Just start anywhere, just like I dreamed. It felt surreal to hold the official documents in my hands, proof that I was no longer just an overworked janitor, but a legitimate game developer and founder. Of course, reality set in quickly. I needed capital, marketing, and more hours to complete a full game. Still, I knew if I'd made it this far, there had to be a way forward. In what felt like a whirlwind, I found a small group of talented individuals willing to freelance for me, folks who believed in Discover Eyes enough to accept partial payment now and promises of more later. A young composer, a budding concept artist, and a brilliant level designer joined my cause. We huddled in my living room, laptops balanced on our knees, brainstorming how to make the game truly remarkable. Money remained tight, but I devoted every cent to the game. I survived on instant noodles and thrift store clothing. Sleep was a luxury. My day job at the bookstore was my only stable income, and every paycheck went straight into JSA Technologies. Mr. Barry watched me race out the door at closing time, always reminding me to stay healthy. I'd respond with a tired grin, "I will, I promise." The team's excitement fueled me. We spent countless nights iterating on puzzles and refining the game's story. We wanted players to feel a sense of wonder mixed with unsettling emotions, a game that would linger in their minds long after they shut it off. Each new build brought us closer to that vision. Despite the hardships, I sensed we were on the verge of something extraordinary. The momentum around Discover Eyes intensified. Industry insiders labeled it a game to watch, and a few larger indie publishers took notice. One day, I received an email from a major tech magazine requesting an interview. They wanted to feature JSA Technologies as an up-and-coming studio. I nearly screamed from excitement, thinking about how far I'd come from scrubbing floors to landing a major feature. The interview took place over video call. They asked about my background, my vision, and how I navigated obstacles. I spoke candidly about being kicked out, working multiple jobs, and losing Grandma, my biggest supporter. I choked up a bit, but I pushed through, determined to honor her memory. When the article went live, it portrayed me as a symbol of grit and resilience. While the attention felt overwhelming, I was grateful for the chance to show my parents, though they were never named in the piece, that my path wasn't a joke. A part of me still ached for their acknowledgement, but I also felt a surging pride that I'd found success on my own terms. With the spotlight shining brighter, more doors opened. Offers for partnerships, investment deals, and marketing proposals filled my inbox. It was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. I had to figure out which opportunities aligned with my vision for Discover Eyes, and which were mere distractions. The night of our official game launch approached, and I was a bundle of nerves. We scheduled a live stream to reveal Discover Eyes to the public. My small team and I gathered in my living room, eyes glued to laptops, hearts pounding with anticipation. Hundreds of viewers tuned in, and the chat buzzed with excitement. When we finally hit go live, we showcased the opening sequence, where the protagonist wakes in a fragmented reality, searching for hidden messages. The response was immediate and electric. Viewers marveled at the game's visuals and praised the emotional resonance. My heart soared. This was everything I'd dreamed of. Not all was smooth sailing. Some complained about minor bugs, and a few critics debated the game's pacing. But the overwhelming positivity overshadowed the hiccups. By the end of the live stream, I saw tears in my teammates' eyes. We'd actually done it. we'd built and launched our own game, fueled by passion and perseverance. That night, after the live stream ended, I collapsed on my couch, phone buzzing non-stop with congratulations. Amid the chaos, I scrolled through dozens of texts and messages. One subject line made my breath catch. It was from a major venture capital firm. My fingers trembled as I opened it, eyes widening at the potential offer that lay inside. In the days that followed, Discover Eyes sold beyond our wildest projections. Reviews poured in, heralding it as one of the year's most innovative indie games. Suddenly, JSA Technologies was on the map. The venture capital firm that had emailed me wanted to invest millions into our next project, offering resources to expand our capabilities. My mind reeled. Before I could fully process that, bigger news hit. A major tech conglomerate expressed interest in acquiring JSA Technologies altogether. The sum they hinted at was astronomical. For someone who once counted pennies to afford groceries, it felt like I was living in a dream I never thought possible. My team and I weighed our options carefully. Accepting a buyout could grant us freedom to explore even more ambitious ideas. But it also meant giving up total control. Eventually, we decided the offer was too good to ignore, especially since the buyers promised creative independence within their umbrella. After extensive negotiations, we hammered out a deal. The final sale price? $355 million. Reading that number in the contract nearly made my heart stop. It felt unreal, like stepping into another dimension. I signed the papers with a trembling hand. Part of me wanted to cry, thinking of Grandma. She had believed in me when no one else would. Now I was on the precipice of a whole new life. News of JSA Technologies' massive sale spread rapidly. Old classmates reached out with sudden enthusiasm, strangers congratulated me on social media, and industry veterans praised the game's success story. Then, just as I expected, my parents finally reached out, not with an apology but with carefully chosen words hinting they wanted to reconnect as a family. I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Where had they been all those years? Had they once asked if I needed help or if I was okay when Grandma died? No. Now that the headlines boasted of my millionaire status, they claimed to miss me. My father called, voice oddly gentle, asking if we could meet to talk things through. My mother chimed in about wanting to heal old wounds. My emotions were mixed. Some part of me craved their love, still wounded from being tossed out as a teen. Another part was boiling with resentment. They wanted in on my newfound wealth. They wanted a life of luxury they believed they were owed. I could sense it. Yet, for reasons beyond logic, I agreed to see them. Curiosity and a twinge of sadness stirring in my chest. I arranged a meeting at a cafe downtown, preparing myself for whatever they had to say. I arrived at the cafe early, nerves twisting my stomach. My parents walked in and for a second, I couldn't breathe. My father's stern gaze lingered on me, while my mother had that familiar look of mild disapproval. Yet, they both appeared a little uncertain, glancing around as if unsure how to approach me. We exchanged awkward greetings. Then, as soon as we sat, my father said, "We've been worried about you." I almost laughed out loud. My mother quickly added, "We're proud of what you've accomplished. It's just, we'd like to be part of your life again." I felt the bitterness rise. "Where were you when I was struggling? Grandma died, and you never called. I nearly lost everything chasing this dream you despised." They sputtered excuses, something about tough love and believing it was the only way to teach me responsibility. My jaw tightened. I could see right through the half-truths. They pivoted to praising my success, dropping hints about how a family should share everything, implying they expected me to provide for them now. I let them ramble, my heart pounding. Finally, I cleared my throat and told them, "I'm good if you want to mend our relationship, but I have one condition." Their eyes glistened. My mom asked, "What condition, Ava?" I paused, drawing in a big breath, then started. 5 years. You can't ask me for a single dollar for 5 years. Or until I decide you've truly changed. If you break that condition, we're done for good. Their faces paled, shock etched into every line. They tried to negotiate. 5 years is too long, my mother protested. We're your parents. Why should we wait to enjoy your success? My father's voice grew heated. We raised you, we sacrificed for you. The old arguments flared to life, but I stood firm. This isn't about revenge, I said, steadying my voice. It's about trust. When you threw me out, I had no safety net. Grandma, with her limited means, saved me. She taught me unconditional love. You? My voice trembled, but I pressed on. You saw me as a tool, someone to fulfill your dreams. Their indignation crackled in the air. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were genuine or manipulative. I watched my father's jaw tighten. He knew there was little leverage left. Fine, he snapped. We'll do it your way. We left the cafe in tense silence, an unspoken understanding dividing us. They wanted my money, but they had to earn it. As I walked away, a flood of emotions crashed over me. Sadness, triumph, anger, relief. Despite the tension, some part of me wished they'd use this chance to truly reconnect, to show me honest love instead of greedy motives. That night, I found myself sitting alone in the quiet of my new apartment. No more cramped living room or dusty floors. The space felt too big, too empty. I stared at the city lights through floor-to-ceiling windows, remembering Grandma's unwavering encouragement. Tears stung my eyes, but I also felt a sense of fulfillment. I had come a long way from the 17-year-old kicked out onto the street. I recalled all the nights I hustled through multiple jobs, the heartbreak of losing Grandma, the unwavering passion that pushed me to code day and night. In the end, it led me to a dream I once thought impossible. A thriving game development career, a multi-million-dollar deal, and a name in the industry that stood for resilience. My parents, ironically, stood outside my circle of joy, waiting on the sidelines, hoping for a piece of the pie. Yet for better or worse, I'd given them a shot under my strict condition. Whether they would rise to the challenge or confirm my worst suspicions was yet to be seen. But I knew one thing: I wasn't the broken, frightened teenager anymore. I was Ava, the woman who fought for her dream and won. I closed my eyes, breathing in the moment. My journey was far from over, but for now I felt something close to peace, and that was enough.